Hello, and thank you for joining us. Municipal leaders from across the Northwest are calling for the resignation of Canadian Senator Lynn Beyak. The senator from Dryden wrote an open letter to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau earlier this month and called for Indigenous people to turn in their status cards and accept a fair negotiated payout in return for Canadian citizenship. In a unanimous decision, the Northern Ontario Municipal Association Board condemned Beyak's remarks and called for the senator to resign. The letter criticized the Trudeau government's decision to create a second ministry for Indigenous issues. Beyak also told First Nations people to stop the guilt and blame, settle all outstanding land claims and treaties, and move forward together as Canadians. NOMA officials expressed disgust at the senator's comments, saying they were beyond ignorant, crossing a line. President Wendy Landry says when in a position like Beyak's, comments are held to a higher standard.
Not only incorrect, but targeting a specific group and dividing our communities and making problems for our relationship building processes in the years that we are all recognizing truth and reconciliation and what the TRC Commission brought forward in the recommendations. I think that you're working against what Canada is working towards.
As a representative of Northwestern Ontario especially, and our area, in the Dryden area, where there were 9 residential schools, Dryden, Sioux Lookout, Kenora, it's very offensive to the population, both Indigenous and non-Indigenous of our area.
Lawrence says Beyak's comments come just months after she met with members of Sioux Lookout's Truth and Reconciliation Committee, which challenged her positive views about the residential school system. The federal Conservatives have removed Beyak from all committees, but have not expelled her from their caucus. Meanwhile, Kenora MP Bob Nault has released a statement encouraging the senator to resign, adding she does not speak for the North. Meanwhile, NOMA officials kicked off their annual regional conference with a special event, the 10th Annual Immigration Forum. Many communities are looking for new residents to help address future labor shortages. And there's also a focus on retaining international students who come to Thunder Bay. Adam Riley reports.
Representatives from municipalities across the Northwest descended upon Thunder Bay for the annual Northern Municipal Association Regional Conference this week. For day one of the conference, the focus was on immigration and how to encourage people to relocate to the region. This year also marks the 10th year of the Immigration Seminar. Thunder Bay Multicultural Association Executive Director Kathy Woodbeck says she is encouraged by the growth and the feedback from those coming to the region.
People talking about how comfortable they are and how they've been welcomed into the region, how they love the cities that they live in, newcomers who have moved to Marathon and to Terrace Bay, to Sioux Lookout, to Fort Frances, Dryden and Kenora, all across the region, who say they love the small towns, they love the people, everyone is friendly and welcoming, they've found work.
NOMA President Wendy Landry says as the delegates begin to see the numbers, this will give all the municipalities the opportunity to revitalize their methods of attraction.
I think that the leaders in the room today are finding out that there's a lot of work going on. The numbers are high, with almost 700 students at Confederation College this year and 1,000 students at Lakehead University. Gives a good indication that people are willing to come to our part of the province to check it out. And so I think it's our job as leaders to get people to feel comfortable here, feel welcomed, and to make the decision to stay.
Ayub Ansari is a lawyer and a recent graduate of Lakehead University. He addressed delegates about efforts to retain those students who attend post-secondary education in the area. One of those efforts is to change the perception of learning trades as opposed to careers in law, medicine, or engineering for students.
And I think conversations like this, where we're highlighting the need for it, and at the end of the day, people want employment opportunities, right? What good is it to graduate from university and not be able to work in that field, or not getting a position in that field, so on and so forth. So at the end of the day, if that need is highlighted and that gap is addressed, then the perceptions can change.
Adam Riley, TBT News.
Day 2 of the NOMA Regional Conference focused on a pair of issues affecting the Northwest. The head of FedNor was at the conference to get feedback on infrastructure funding policies, and a code of conduct for politicians put the focus on a messy situation in Red Rock. Adam Riley again reports.
Municipalities across the Northwest count on funding from higher levels of government in order to keep the infrastructure in their communities in proper working order without having to dip heavily into the residential and commercial tax base. In a presentation by Amy DiMatteo, FedNor's Director General, he spoke about the Prosperity and Growth Strategy Initiative, which is aimed directly at Northern Ontario, and to encourage NOMA members to provide input for when the federal government builds an economic development plan for the region.
To ensure that we have the best advice from Northerners as to what are the needs in Northern Ontario that should be taken into consideration, that it reflects Northern needs, and it's not a plan built in Ottawa that really doesn't reflect our realities and the needs that we have in Northern Ontario.
Also on the docket of discussion were updates to municipal codes of conduct, including the use of integrity commissioners and how investigations are handled through the Ontario Ombudsperson's Office. At one point, the presentation by Laura Pettigrew, the General Counsel for the Ombudsperson's Office, used a local example which irked some in the crowd.
I wished I would have had a little bit of heads up that they were going to bring Red Rock up here today, because I would have had a few more notes for them.
The example reference dates back to an incident where Lewis Martin, then a citizen, was issued a notice of trespass. Martin was eventually elected to council. While the trespass notice did not prevent him from his duties as a councillor, he filed a complaint with the office. Both Martin and Mayor Gary Nelson were attending the conference. Nelson, while unprepared for the reference, was quick to provide his comments and issues with the investigation.
All the citizen, and later on a councillor, was asked to do was apologize to the clerk, and this matter would have gone away. He'd look at me, laugh, and say, no. What do you want us to do? You suggested we get a code of conduct. We've done that. He will not sign this. What are we supposed to do?
While unable to comment on specific cases, Pettigrew says the use of the Red Rock case was used to highlight what the office has investigated.
I suspect people in the area may be familiar with what had happened in Red Rock, and I think the point to get across with that particular investigation is, one, we try to avoid formal investigation. It is a last resort. We make several attempts to resolve things informally, and if we can't, we go in there.
Pettigrew stresses the Office of the Ombudsperson is focused on issues in the system, but not with individual blame. Adam Riley, TBT News.
NOMA's three-day regional conference wrapped up Friday afternoon. Before heading back to their home communities, delegates from across the Northwest were finding out what they can do as leaders to make sure their communities are fire resilient and safe from future disasters. Christina Jung explains.
The final day of the NOMA conference started out with Municipal Affairs Minister Bill Morrow highlighting the number of government resources and support that's available for every community. Morrow says from the overall increase in municipal funding to the expansion of the Northern Highways program, the amount of financial support for communities in the north has been record-setting.
Perhaps to capture it in one line, one number, when we were elected, support to municipalities was about $1.1 billion in Ontario. Today, by the end of 2018 or the middle of 2018, it will be $4.2 billion. So we have massively increased the supports that come to municipalities now, providing the ability for them to do much more work in their communities and providing significant tax relief for the property taxpayers in our municipalities.
Another topic of discussion on the final day was dealing with natural disasters. While hurricanes and tornadoes are not prevalent in Northern Ontario, the region still sees its fair share of wildfires.
But again, we're in for a bleaker future for wildfire in Canada. We're going to get to the point where we can't possibly fight every fire. We're going to have a new accommodation with fire in this country.
According to guest speaker Glenn McLivery from the Institute for Catastrophic Loss Reduction, wildfires will happen in Canada and it will be inevitable. However, through bylaws and education, there are ways we can save houses and communities from burning down. Shunya Councillor Don Smith says this presentation made him realize there are simple things to do to keep communities safe.
One of the things that I found really interesting was he talked about shrubs, like people planting cedar trees up against their house, and your landscaping and how that can actually induce fire. My takeaway from a lot of what he said is that you can actually help prevent your home and protect your home just by doing some common sense things. And as you said, it was like a light bulb going off. You think, well, yeah, I mean, the boat's parked beside the house. If it catches on fire, the boat's full of gas, we're in trouble.
Smith says this presentation helped him realize how useful bylaws can be and how municipalities in this region can use it to help form fire-resilient communities. NOMA President Wendy Landry says these three-day conferences remind her and other delegates how important it is to continue to maintain their relationship with one another.
We not only gather information from each other, but it builds our momentum and what it is that we're advocating for our municipalities in the Northwest, and it helps each other. So we're a stronger voice together than we are separate, and so this forum brings us all together in one, so we can have the opportunity to share ideas with each other, share information, get updated, and empowered. We empower each other to continue the fight.
The next NOMA conference will be held in the spring on May 2nd to the 4th in Kenora. Christina Jung, TBT News.
And some new duties for Thunder Bay Rainy River MP Don Rusnak. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has named Rusnak Parliamentary Secretary to new Minister of Indigenous Services Jane Philpott. The Indigenous Services Ministry was created last month when the Indigenous and Northern Affairs Ministry was split into two separate portfolios. Rusnak was also chair of the Liberal Indigenous Caucus, but due to his new duties, Rusnak has stepped down in favor of Winnipeg MP Dan Vandal. Well, with the end of summer, the Ontario legislature is back in session, and it didn't take long for Northern Ontario issues to enter discussions. A hot-button issue for the region is the delay in twinning Highway 17 between Kenora and the Manitoba border. Last month, the Northern Highways Program report revealed that section would be delayed until 2021. The revelation prompted a sharp response from federal Liberal MP Bob Nault, who called the new timeline simply unacceptable. And this week, Kenora Rainy River MPP Sarah Campbell accused the Liberals of blaming First Nations for the delay.
No idea when this crucial project will be finished. Even more shocking is that instead of accepting responsibility for the delay, the Minister of Northern Development blamed Shoal Lake 39 First Nation. Is this the type of reconciliation we can expect from this government?
What I can confirm is right across the north there is a great deal of excitement about the fact that our government is so committed to investing hundreds of millions of dollars in expanding highways in every corner of the North, Speaker. In fact, we see in our Northern Highways program more money is dedicated to the expansion of highways than probably at any other time in Ontario history, Speaker.
And some prominent members of the Ontario Cabinet got a tour of one of Canada's oldest power generating stations earlier this week. Energy Minister Glenn Thibeault visited a number of generating stations in the Northwest recently, including the one in Kekabeka Falls. Thibeault and Minister Bill Morrow also visited the Surge building to take in the entirety of what's being done here and to see the importance of OPG.
Many of the generating stations that we have in Atikokan, here, and just seeing the importance of the role that OPG has here in northwestern Ontario and the role it plays and the important role that it plays in our overall energy system.
As he toured the 111-year-old building, Thibeault says he was pleasantly surprised with how well the building was still running with only minor modernizations. Well, coming up after the break, boaters on Pauli Lake near Nipigon find themselves high and dry.
Right now we're not.
Boaters at Polly Lake near Nipigon have been left high and dry following some recent moves by the Ministry of Natural Resources. Every year, the MNR controls water levels on the Nipigon River system by having Ontario Power Generation increase or decrease the water flow through their hydro dams. The cottagers say they never get any advance warning, and their boats are now stuck on dry land. Corey Nordstrom reports.
Michael DeChico has spent almost 48 hours day and night working to free his boat from the clay at Polly Lake. DeChico says everything was as usual on the lake when he left to run errands on Tuesday morning, but when he arrived home a few hours later, the water had gone down roughly 20 feet, sinking his boat into the clay.
There is, I don't know, about a dozen cottages across the lake where their only means of transportation are boats. And I'm not sure if people are stranded over there right now or not, but if my boat was in the water, I'd be over there.
Instead of spending his vacation fishing and making renovations to his cottage, Michael DeChico now has to deal with making sure his boat doesn't get ruined.
I don't really want to bash anybody or point fingers directly. But with that being said, somebody needs to be responsible for this. This created a gargantuan headache for me.
Polly Lake, located about 10 minutes north of Nipigon, is home to roughly 85 cottages, and at least a dozen residents have the same issue and now have to work to get their boats off the dry lake bottom. DeChico says he and his neighbors are often blindsided by the lowered water levels, even though it's something that happens every year. OPG posts water flow notifications on their website, but DeChico says the poor cell phone and internet service here makes it nearly impossible to check it.
At one point in time, they used to come around to the cottages and like vocally tell us. But other than that, it's random when this happens. So somebody didn't do their due diligence, whether it was OPG or the MNR. Somebody dropped the ball, and we need help now.
OPG officials were asked about their notification process and responded that all decisions about the water flows on the Nipigon River are made by the MNR. We asked the MNR how it notifies the residents about water level changes, but the ministry referred that inquiry back to OPG. Corey Nordstrom, TBT News.
Well, students attending public school in Atikokan could soon have a change in venue. Declining enrollment numbers and provincial efforts to reduce empty spaces in schools mean amalgamation is planned for 2 schools in Atikokan. According to the Atikokan trustee for Rainy River District School Board, Mike Lewis, North Star Community School and Atikokan High School will combine to be a K to grade 12 school with 350 students total. He says the board was given a list of options by a consulting firm which has experience in situations like these.
The option that we have chosen, we passed a resolution to that effect on last Wednesday, is to demolish Atikokan High School as it is, with the exception of the double gym and a large structure which is built by local people and volunteers called our Outers Building, and reconstruct a building, a new building on that site, move the K to 6s in there. So we'd have a single school from K to 12. That's our hope. We've made that proposal now to the ministry, and we're awaiting their approval.
Lewis says if approved, the project would be for the new school would be worth nearly $23 million. Well, presentations were held at the Valhalla Inn earlier this week for the proposed open pit mine in Greenstone and Geraldton. Members of Greenstone Gold and the Canadian Environment Assessment Association spoke to a group about what the plans are going to be. Greenstone Gold Mines, a business partly owned by local business Premier Gold, will be changing the scenery of Greenstone, as is the case in all open pit mining. The mine will need to make some shifts to the Trans-Canada Highway and curve it around the mine. The OPP detachment and Hydro 1 substation will both need to be relocated. Mining was first introduced to the area in the 1930s and stopped in the 70s after gold veins dried up. But with modern technology, the area could be a prosperous mining community again. Greenstone spokesperson Ian Horn says the mine would bring major capital into the area.
How should I say, dramatically improve the situation in the Greenstone municipality and in Geraldton and the other wards. So the project itself is going to cost about $1.25 billion to construct. And of that expenditure, we're expecting that about $500 million of that will be spent in the local region.
Horn also says by their calculations, the town of Greenstone could grow from 5,000 people to as many as 7,500. If all goes as planned, Greenstone's Hard Rock project could start construction as early as 2019. Well, Treaty 3 Police, the OPP, and Wabasamong First Nation are teaming up for Missing Person Awareness Day tomorrow. The all-day event aims to help with the reporting of missing persons. OPP say the event in the community 120 kilometers northwest of Kenora will also be used to collect DNA samples from family members of missing persons for identification purposes. Well, coming up next, regional health care gets a big boost from the Northwest Lynn and province. Remote communities across northwestern Ontario will get a little closer to Thunder Bay, at least for critical medical care. That's because the Local Health Integration Network has announced $2 million to help expand a telemedicine program that connects remote hospitals and nursing stations with specialists in Thunder Bay. Saves lives. That's because this is where Thunder Bay's Regional Critical Care Response, or RCCR program, goes into action, allowing specialists in Thunder Bay to connect with 11 hospitals and 3 nursing stations across the region. On Tuesday, the hospital, Lynn, and province announced $2 million over the next 3 years to expand the program.
The majority of the funding is actually allocated to our nursing component. We have funding that supplies a 24/7 RCCR nurse. It also helps out with our RTs and other allied health that are able to come in and beyond the consulting telemedicine conferences that we do.
The RCCR program has already been in place for 2 years, and healthcare practitioners say it's seen plenty of use. Lori Harima is the chief nursing executive at Geraldton Hospital. She says she's seen the RCCR program save lives. During this past April's ice storms, a 61-year-old man came to Geraldton Hospital in respiratory distress. But without the ability to transfer him to Thunder Bay Regional, hospital staff in Geraldton relied on help from RCCR staff in Thunder Bay during a 15-hour intubation.
There was a lot of adjustment to drugs. We had to do a lot of suctioning of the actual intubation tube that was down. We don't use the vent on a regular basis, so any kind of alarms, any kind of troubleshooting, anything like that, we had the RT here. And I really do believe that this gentleman's outcome can be measured by the response of having the RCCR team.
The RCCR program also reduces unnecessary patient transfers. With persistent demand for medical access across the region, hospital and Lynn officials say the program could expand to even more remote communities.
Right now, we're moving into Sioux Lookout and asking Sioux Lookout to look into the northern regions of all the Indigenous communities to do a similar project, but not necessarily just critical care, for anything that needs to be done from nursing station to emergency department.
When we think of sports, we naturally gravitate towards hockey, baseball, football. But recreational shooting has become very popular recently, and one man from Dryden has earned the title of world champion in police pistol combat shooting. Adam Riley has more.
Rolly Miles is not a member of the Canadian Armed Forces, nor is he a police officer, but his accuracy in police pistol combat has made him one of the top shots in the world. Miles recently returned from competing on the world stage in Germany, where he earned top prize in the pistol category.
We're pretty active here at this club. We have a monthly shoot, we have annual matches, we have the Ontario Provincial Championships, we've hosted national championships here, so shooting isn't really new to us here, and we thought, why not go to the world stage and, you know, put your hat in the ring against the best in the world, and it was pretty fruitful this time.
For Miles, who unlike many of the other competitors works a full-time job and shoots as a hobby, being named #1 in the world is pretty surreal.
You know what? It says world champion on the trophies there, but I don't feel any different.
Remote communities across northwestern Ontario will get a little closer to Thunder Bay, at least for critical medical care. That's because the Local Health Integration Network has announced $2 million to help expand a telemedicine program that connects remote hospitals and nursing stations with specialists in Thunder Bay. This room saves lives. That's because this is where Thunder Bay's Regional Critical Care Response, or RCCR program, goes into action, allowing specialists in Thunder Bay to connect with 11 hospitals and 3 nursing stations across the region. On Tuesday, the hospital, Lynn, and province announced $2 million over the next 3 years to expand the program.
The majority of the funding is actually allocated to our nursing component. We have funding that supplies a 24/7 RCCR nurse. It also helps out with our